Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into yet another episode of The Three Technique, a college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. If you're watching on YouTube, you can tell that there's just a single box on your screen. I'm Trey Reeves. I'm hosting. I'm pulling all the duties tonight. Garrett and Mitch are getting ready for the football season in their various ways. Mitch got the opportunity to go to one of the true cathedrals of our sport this week in Lambeau Field up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Sounded like it was an awesome trip. Really excited for him. Garrett's still recovering. He was, happy to be back earlier this week, but he needed just a little bit more time to get ready. So you got me for this evening or for this commute as I come to you from a sweltering Dallas, Texas. High of 112 today. Just absolutely awful. If you tried to be outside between the hours of 9 a.m. and as I record this, it's still over 100 degrees outside in the evening. So absolutely awful outside, but I'm happy to be talking to you from inside. And I'm happy to talk to you because we've made it. It is game week. Week 0 is this Saturday. We are less than a week away from officially kicking off the 2023 college football season. An offseason that started slow. It seemed like it was flying by at first. And then as we got closer and closer to kickoff, it sure did pick up with realignment rumors, with realignment action happening, with just the sport seeming like it was coming apart at the seams at some points, but all of that is almost in our rearview mirror as we look forward to Saturday. I know it's not the best slate of games. I know that it's not as exciting as, have coach on the hot seat in Nebraska last year. I know that there's not as many storylines, but that us at the Three Technique are going to be very, very excited to be watching Notre Dame Navy, reacting to everything that happens and all the other games as well. But we'll break all that down later this week. Mitch and Garrett will be back on Thursday's episode to give you our final predictions. And tonight, I'm just going to channel one of the greats of our industry, Mr. Josh Pate, and come to you solo and talk to you a little bit about what to expect for this football season. So I don't have a chalice of supremacy as Mr. Pate does. I do have lovely Waterloo sparkling water that I'm going to be sipping from here now as I need a break for my voice. But guys, I'm so excited because as we finally count down the days, we finally get to see what's on the field. We finally get to see, put talking season behind us. We finally get to, get rid of all the distractions. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think there's some really important things that if you might have fallen asleep since the halftime of the TCU Georgia game, which I can't blame you if you did fall asleep during that game because it was obviously a blowout, but if you fell asleep at halftime of that game and you're just now waking up back into the college football ethosphere, there's a lot that you missed this offseason. So my goal for this episode tonight is to catch you up, set the stage for what we get to start enjoying, what we get to start consuming this Saturday. Before I do that, I'm going to pay the bills real quick. Make sure that we are following on all of the socials. We are on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We're on Instagram at 3TechPod. We are on YouTube, 3TechPod, youtube.com/@3TechPod. Make sure that you are liked and subscribed on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, everywhere that you get the show. It really does help us out if you subscribe, if you like the videos, if you leave a comment. Really does help us out as we seek to combat against the ever-powerful algorithms and try to rocket up those lists of recommendations for folks. And make sure that you're telling friends as well as we get into the season. If you're looking to upgrade your knowledge for this college football season, make sure that you are buying the Transfer Portal CFB Preview magazine. It is almost time. Time is almost up to consume this content. We have amazing content for you. If you have not gotten in on this bandwagon yet, what are you waiting for? It is awesome. There's been amazing testimonies from some really awesome people in the college football media world, people from ESPN, Fox, The Athletic have been reading the content that we've been putting out with the Transfer Portal CFB and loving it. It's right up there with some of the best preview magazines in the game, very aesthetically pleasing if you're an aesthetics person, and it's half the price. If you missed the sale yesterday, you're in luck. It's still just $9.99 for the remainder of this week. And you have plenty of time as you're in your office. You know you're not going to be focused on anything but college football for the next couple of weeks. So make sure that you are picking up this magazine, consuming it, so that you can be the smartest person at your week 1 watch party, ready to go for the season. With that being said, I'm going to jump right in, and we're going to talk tonight about this offseason. We're going to summarize it. We are going to, again, like I said off the top, if you fell asleep at halftime of the TCU Georgia national championship game, a game that Georgia won 65-7, I don't need to remind TCU fans or Georgia fans of that. But if you fell asleep at halftime of that game and you've kind of tuned out for 8 months now, welcome back. First of all, we are very, very glad to have you. You can go back and listen to our conference preview episodes that we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. They are really in-depth research. Like I said, you can read the magazine to get ready, but you missed quite a bit this offseason. It was an offseason that started pretty slow. It was a relatively slow coaching carousel that I'll break down here in just a second, but boy, by July, was it heated up. It was media rights deals. It was conference realignment. It was teams that we never thought would leave certain conferences packing up their bags and finding any way out. A complete power shift in college football with outside of the top 2 conferences in the Big Ten and the SEC, the reshuffling that the Big 12 has rocketed its status up to possibly the 3rd best conference with the additions. All of that's off the field in addition to what we saw the headlines on the field. So let's start with the impact coaching hires, because if you were sleeping on this coaching carousel, I don't really blame you. It was a softer one for the most part, especially when you compare it to the 2022 season, because we didn't have a Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma for USC. We didn't have a Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame for LSU. We don't see big coaching movements like that very often. And we didn't see that again this year, but we did see some really big moves. And I'll start at the most famous one. I'll start at what everybody seems to be talking about ahead of week 1. And that's Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, moving up from the FCS level at Jackson State, a program that he revitalized, that he put back on the map. He made relevant again. He fought Florida State and other national powers for legit 5-star recruits to get to Little Jackson, Mississippi. He's leaving that behind to go become the head coach at Colorado Buffaloes in Boulder, a program that has enjoyed a lot of success nationally in history, but has really been irrelevant since they joined the Pac-12 about a decade ago. And he's looking to revitalize that program. He's come in and completely wiped out that roster. They've had over 50 transfers since he was announced and completely brought in a new roster. It has been a complete overhaul. He basically came in and said, look, most of you are not going to make the cut. Most of you, it's a 1-11 roster. We're going to have some tough love. We're going to have some tough conversations. And most of you are not going to make the cut. Plain and simple. And a lot of people in the media didn't like that. A lot of people thought that that was a little bit too harsh for when he came in, but it's working for him. It seems to be working for him. The program has been revitalized from a fan interest standpoint. They had attendance records at the spring game. And the vibes are very high in Boulder, despite not really knowing a lot about what they're going to put on the field in 2023. Now, we've seen some talk about them as a dark horse Pac-12 title contender, that they could win 7, 8, 9 games. I think that's way too early to say. Could that all happen? Could the talent all come together? And could we have maybe a miracle run like we saw from TCU last year? Of course, it's college football. That can always happen. But is it likely? I don't think so. I think the way more likely scenarios, you see really steady improvement. This was a 1-11 team last year. So winning 2 games would double your win total. I think you see some steady improvement under Prime. I think the standards are going to be raised. I think the caliber of athlete that he's bringing in 5-star recruits for the first time in modern Colorado history. That's going to pay dividends on the field. But I think that he's running into a Pac-12 that, ironically, as it fades into oblivion with all the teams leaving, is strong as it has been in recent memory with teams at the top. So it's going to be a very difficult road for him in year 1. To me, a successful season would be winning 4 or 5 games. If he can get to a bowl game, that is a masterclass in coaching. A successful season is winning 4 or 5 games. And I know that that's not the standard that he wants long term, but that's quadrupling or multiplying times 5 the number of games that program won just a year ago. And it's a program that's been down in the dumps, has had a few highlight blip years here and there. I know they paid for a Pac-12 title a couple years ago, but overall, it's been tough sledding since the 90s. And Deion Sanders is bringing swagger back to that program and making it relevant once again. Another guy that's trying to bring relevance back to a historically proud program is Matt Rule at Nebraska. And if you know anything about Matt Rule, his MO is to take a program, year one, come in, tear it down to the studs, and rebuild it from the ashes and make it like a phoenix rising from the ashes and be really relevant and powerful starting in year 2, basically. So when Matt Rule shows up at Nebraska, the expectation, I think, from the Nebraska fan base, they want to win. They obviously, gave Scott Frost a lot of time, probably more time than they should have, as a guy that's an alum and just a favorite son of that program. But when you hire Matt Rule, you've got to be expecting a rough year 1. I don't know that it's going to be like it was at Temple or Baylor where they won 1 game or 2 games. I think they have more talent than either of those Temple and Baylor teams in this year. And I think that he's dipped into the portal a little bit to make sure that it's not a just catastrophically bad season. But this is another situation where I think making a bowl game would be just a miracle job by Matt Rule. I'm not expecting that for Nebraska this year. I think long-term, this is one of my favorite hires of this offseason. I think Nebraska's in great hands with Matt Rule, but man, it's just really hard to go against his MO. He even did it in the NFL with the Carolina Panthers. They were really bad in year 1. That's just how he does things. And they knew that when they made that hire. The fan base knew that when they made that hire. And they are, I think, ready for the rebuild. I think they're ready to invest long-term and not worry about short-term success at the expense of long-term game. I think that's a fan base that is starving. That's a fan base that is ready to win. And they're going to figure it out eventually. I really do think Nebraska, especially as they move into a new era in the Big Ten, they're going to have some new competition. I think long-term, the stock is going up on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But we'll see how that goes in year 1. I'm not expecting big things from them in Matt Rule's first year. A couple of programs that I am higher on in their first year with new head coaches. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. He comes over from Cincinnati. He's the only coach to ever take a group of 5 program to the college football playoff. That's quite the feather in his cap. He's bringing over a lot of his coaching staff, but he dipped into, I think this was brilliant, he dipped into not an assistant pool of his to hire Phil Longo away from North Carolina. Phil Longo leaves Mac Brown in North Carolina to become the offensive coordinator at Wisconsin. And I know what you're thinking. Wisconsin, known for ground and pound, known for, having the best offensive line, the best running backs, the best bully ball game in the entire country. They've been known for that for their entire existence, practically. Not so much anymore. This is not your granddad's Wisconsin. We've been talking about this a lot on the podcast this summer, but if you haven't noticed, Wisconsin is not your granddad's Wisconsin, not your dad or even your older brother's Wisconsin, where they're handing it to Melvin Gordon or Monte Ball or all those other great running backs that they've had through that program over the last decade plus. They're going to run a version of the air raid. They're going to run Phil Longo's offense that put up 1 billion points with Drake May. Oh, and they might have just gotten the best transfer quarterback in the game in Tanner Mordecai from SMU to do it. So going from a couple coaches that I'm tempering expectations, I have huge expectations for Luke Fickell in year 1 at Wisconsin. The schedule's very kind to him. There's a wide open window for him to make a lot of noise in Madison and get those fans excited again in a way that they haven't been in the last few years. Hugh Freeze at Auburn, he's a guy he's a wild card. And Hugh Freeze, when you hire Hugh Freeze, you are hiring a wild card head coach. You don't know what you're going to get. I know that he has SEC experience. I know that he has all the drama that comes with hiring Hugh Freeze as the head coach away from Liberty and original Ole Miss. But you just don't know what you're going to get. I think they're going to be prolific on offense. I think getting Peyton Thorne from Michigan State was a great pickup in the transfer portal. This is a team I could see going 3-9 or 9-3 and really not a lot of in between. I think Auburn's either going to be, down in the dumps and rebuilding this year, or they're going to surprise everybody and make a run towards a New Year's Six Bowl. I really don't think there's going to be much in between for Auburn. And it's going to be really exciting to watch unfold and see how Hugh Freeze develops that program and gets his second chance at life in the SEC. And just one more coaching hire for you, G5 level. Keep an eye on Jamie Chadwell at Liberty. Liberty's moving into a conference for the first time in Conference USA. I think that they're going to dominate that league along with Western Kentucky in the years to come, as long as it survives. And Jamie Chadwell is one of the great offensive minds of this generation of coaches. His offense at Coastal Carolina was electric with Grayson McCall running the show. He has a lot more resources at Liberty than he did at Coastal Carolina to hire a better coaching staff, to hire better, assistants, more resources into the program, better recruiting budget. They could be the next G5 power, especially with that vacuum kind of emptying out. I really do think Liberty has a chance to make a lot of noise over the next few years, especially in a college football playoff format that is going to reward the group of 5 teams that win their conference. They're going to get a free ticket at least for the next 2 years. So there's 5 head coaches to watch and impact head coaching hires. As I take a quick sip, I want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel, because we are getting ready for the season. They are getting ready for the season. It is something, if you're going out to a football game this fall, you need to have the best gear. You need to have that t-shirt or that hoodie or that hat or that jacket or whatever it is that everyone is talking about. And you know that you like not those generic corporate logos, not those boring block tee, very focus group oriented logos. You like the old school stuff, and we like the old school stuff. So we love what Home Field Apparel has to offer. They have so many schools to choose from. Even if it's not your favorite school, just peruse the different categories, the different schools. They are so fun to look at. They are so fun to just, wear, and they're very comfortable shirts. I'm wearing a Kansas State shirt right now. I didn't go to Kansas State, but the shirt's awesome. It's comfortable. It's fits well, and it looks awesome. And it has a retro logo that looks fantastic. It's a great conversation starter. I have the A&M collection, the Loyola Chicago collection, the Kansas State collection. You name it, their shirts are fantastic. Garrett and Mitch have a lot too. Iowa, Tulane, more Texas A&M, of course, as we're Aggies. But make sure that you're geared up for the season with Home Field Apparel. Use code 3TechPod at checkout on your first order, and you will get 15% off your entire order, no matter how big or small it is, 15% off. And you can pick up the most comfortable shirts and jackets to rep your team in style today. All right. So as we move forward, going through this offseason recap here, I want to talk about some day one impact transfers, because love it or hate it, the transfer portal, not our partners at the transfer portal CFB, but the actual transfer portal that athletes put their names into, it's here to stay. And it is impacting college football in a way unlike any other. There's a lot of day one impact transfers that are going to make their names known at their new homes very, very quickly. I'll start back at Colorado with the quarterback, wide receiver, Travis Hunter, and quarterback, Shadur Sanders. Kind of a 1-2 punch following Coach Prime from Jackson State to Colorado. It's an athlete like the Buffaloes have not seen in quite some time. Both of these guys are athletes. Travis Hunter in particular, a guy that can play both ways, that I think Coach Prime wants to play both ways. I think he's going to see more time at the defensive backfield than he is at wide receiver, but I think they're going to have some gadget plays for him on offense. It seems like that out of camp is the word out of Boulder. But man, it's the type of athlete that transforms a program, and they're going to start from day one. They're going to hit the ground running. And if Colorado is going to make some noise this year, it's going to be on the backs of these two guys that Coach Prime knows. Obviously, Shadur is his son, and that they can, makes a lot of noise with the type of athlete that they have not had there in quite some time. We've also got wide receiver A.D. Mitchell going from Georgia to Texas. I think that's a huge pickup for the Longhorns. And he's kind of a story, if you're bitter about the transfer portal, right? Like, he is the story that you're trying to find some solace in the transfer portal. A.D. Mitchell's the guy. He is transferring for the right reasons. He's not transferring looking for more playing time. He would have started at Georgia this year. He shows up in a wide receiver room at Texas that desperately needed some more depth last year, especially with the injuries that they suffered. And I think he's going to be a big play guy for the Longhorns. Quinn Ewers needs another reliable target in addition to Xavier Worthy, and he's going to have it in A.D. Mitchell. 7 career touchdown catches in his freshman and sophomore year, played a lot. Didn't get to play a ton last year in his sophomore year due to an injury, but he's back healthy. He's ready to go. another former Georgia Bulldog that's going to make a big, big impact. We highlighted him as a three-tech breakout player this year. Former 5-star defensive lineman out of our neck of the woods in Denton, Texas, Bear Alexander. He's going from Georgia to Southern California, USC, and he looks to be the missing piece that could fill the gap on the Trojans defense that they've just been desperately needing. I don't think Lincoln Riley has ever had this talented of a defensive lineman on his roster. Obviously, he can't play every down. He's a big boy. He's pushing, 350 pounds on that defensive line. So he's going to need to rotate out, but he's a run stopper. He's going to fill gaps. He's going to stop the run. He can rush the passer when they need him to. He can slide out and play a little defensive end and be a really, really big mismatch problem for a defensive tackle if they need him to. That is what USC desperately needs. They could not stop the run to save their lives last year. I watched it. Mitch watched it in person at the Cotton Bowl where Tyjae Spears just crushed their hopes and dreams down the stretch of that Cotton Bowl game. So they need a guy like Bear Alexander. They've got him through the transfer portal. Lincoln Riley making his magic known once again in the transfer portal. Lots of big-time quarterbacks are making moves as well. We've got Devin Leary, who we were really, really excited about at NC State before injuries really hampered his season last year. Almost 7,000 career passing yards. He's going from NC State to Kentucky. Also, offensive coordinator Liam Cohen is back at Kentucky this year. The guy that engineered their great offenses. And when he was ripped out, when he went to the Los Angeles Rams for a season last year, it showed on offense. Will Levis was not the same quarterback. The offense was out of sorts. He's back now to run the offense in Lexington, and he's got a great quarterback. I think maybe even better than Will Levis running the helm. Hudson Card's going from Texas to Purdue. That is a huge wild card in the Big Ten West, no pun intended. 148.1 career passer rating at Texas. He was never the full-time starter, but man, did he look good when he was needed at Texas. Brennan Armstrong is reuniting with his former offensive coordinator, Robert Anae, at NC State. Tanner Mordecai, like I mentioned, is going from SMU to Wisconsin. We've got Peyton Thorne going from Michigan State to Auburn. And DJU, our old friend that we have just not been kind to on this show. I'll say it. We haven't been very kind to him, and his play has not really deserved for us to be very kind to him on this show. He's getting a chance to revitalize his career a little bit closer to home, back closer on the West Coast. He's at Oregon State, and Oregon State all of a sudden has probably the most talented on paper quarterback that they've had in quite some time. So watch out for the Beavers. If he can hold on to that job, that's going to be a really, really interesting offense to watch. I mentioned Colorado completely overhauled their roster. I think personally, Florida State did the most in the transfer portal to me to get excited about. I think they're my personal favorite transfer class. When you're highlighted by guys like Jakeem Bell from South Carolina, the tight end, Keon Coleman from Michigan State, Jeremiah Byers, offensive tackle from UTEP, who's a really, really good prospect, Braden Fisk from Western Michigan, defensive lineman, and maybe their best pickup. I'm really excited about Fintrell Cypress from Virginia, a guy that just is a ball hawk in the defensive backfield, knocks down passes, intercepts passes, really, really feels a missing piece for Florida State this year in the defensive backfield. They lost some guys. I'm not negating that. They did lose some guys in the transfer portal. That was the one kind of red flag. But man, what they did in the transfer portal to address those needs, I am really, really, really excited about to see Florida State put those guys on the field. And they return a ton of production. So if you're not already in on the Florida State Seminoles, it's about time to buy stock in that program because you're running out of time. Might be too late already. But with that, speaking of Florida State, who I think is a true contender this year, so taking one more quick sip. Let's talk playoff contenders, because if you haven't been following along, we'll go through the top kind of tiers of playoff contenders. You've got your top four, I think, that have separated from the rest. There's another tier below that if you're looking at odds, and then there's some dark horses right below that before you get into the true long shots. But the top four are the usual suspects, and it's the usual suspects of the last few years: Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State. Clearly the class of college football over the last few years. And as you look into the betting odds for the college football national championship this year, they're at the top once again because they're the most talented teams. They have the best coaching staffs, proven it on the field over the last few years. And quite frankly, they deserve the benefit of the doubt from the odds makers, from you as a college football fan, until proven otherwise. So let's go through it real quick. Georgia, of course, is at the top. They return a ton of production. Of course, they have a new starting quarterback. Stetson Bennett has exhausted his 10 years of eligibility. And Carson Beck just newly announced he will be the starting quarterback. There was a little bit of drama there at camp, but Carson Beck will be the starting quarterback. I think he's a very talented player. All he has to do is drive the bus on the offense and get it to the playmakers that he has, including Brock Bowers at the tight end position, all those talented receivers and running backs. He has a lot of talent around him. The only thing going against Georgia is, quite frankly, history, because they're looking to three-peat, win a third title in a row. They would be the first team to do that since Minnesota in 1934 to 1936. It's been almost 100 years, almost 90 years since we've had a three-peat in college football. And two of those weren't even officially recognized for Minnesota. The 1936 was the first AP poll national title. 1934 and 1935 were retroactively given to the Golden Gophers. But Georgia looking to be the first true three-peat in almost 90 years. That is a lot of history to overcome. History doesn't play on the football field, though. And this, if you're looking for who the most talented, well-coached, all-around team on the college football field this fall, it's the Georgia Bulldogs. They are the team to beat. Despite what history says, despite the difficulty of three-peating, Georgia is the team to beat. Make no question about it. They are playing against history. They did lose their offensive coordinator in Todd Monken to the NFL. But Georgia is the team to beat, as they should be. Their SEC rivals, Alabama, on the other hand, who have been just the behemoths of college football since Nick Saban took over, for the first time, they're showing some kinks in the armor. And we here at the Three Technique have kind of, put our neck out there a little bit that we're not so sure that Alabama should be in this top tier of contenders until we see it on the field. Obviously, Nick Saban gets our benefit of the doubt. Obviously, Nick Saban has faced some questions like this before. But for the first time since 2015, you don't have a bona fide, sure thing, future NFL stud at the starting quarterback position for Alabama. How do they respond to that? How do they respond when they don't have a Bryce Young, when they don't have a Tua Tagovailoa, when they don't have a Jalen Hurts to fall back on? It's going to be really interesting. It looks like Jalen Milroe might be the starter. Saban's pulling it really close to, he's keeping it really close to his vest on that one. We don't really know who we're going to see start that game against Middle Tennessee week 1. It could be a situation where they alternate drives or alternate games like Michigan did last year. So, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, coming down from the transfer coming down from Notre Dame as well. It is a mess at the quarterback position, to put it simply, for Alabama. And they also have a lot of roster turnover. I know they've dealt with that in the past, but they do not have a lot of returning dudes that they can count on at a lot of different positions on both sides of the ball. So Saban's going to earn his money this year. If they make the college football playoff, if they do what Alabama is quote unquote supposed to do, give Nick Saban all the Coach of the Year awards, because he would have done a fantastic job. Up in the Big Ten, of course, Michigan and Ohio State are the co-favorites. Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, it's the best team he's ever had. And I think that he is very, very confident about that fact. J.J. McCarthy returns as starting quarterback. Blake Corum is the all-everything running back. They've got a lot of production to replace at receiver, but it wasn't really elite production last year, to put it kindly. I think that they'll find some guys to plug and play at wide receiver, and the defense is just going to be nasty. All three levels of the defense are going to be absolutely nasty. It's going to be a team that you struggle to see losing more than 2 games in the regular season. And quite frankly, they have Ohio State's number right now. They have beat the Buckeyes 2 years in a row. If you would have told people 3 or 4 years ago that Jim Harbaugh would have the opportunity as a 3-game winning streak over the Ohio State Buckeyes, they would have looked at you like you're crazy, because that just did not seem possible a few years ago. Yet here we are. And all of a sudden, with all of this drama, we haven't really talked about this on the show yet, but Michigan originally was going to suspend Jim Harbaugh for 4 games. There's a recruiting violations. We thought it was about a cheeseburger. It turns out it was actually about COVID recruiting violations. Coaches really don't like that. The coaching circle is very, very adamant that they are not about that. And all of a sudden, that 4-game suspension just got taken away. And Jim Harbaugh will coach all games this season, but it's looking like the NCAA might come down very, very hard on Jim Harbaugh this offseason. So all of a sudden, if you're into the narratives, you've got a last dance Michael Jordan narrative building in Ann Arbor, because Jim Harbaugh, we all know that he likes to flirt with the NFL. We all know that he wants to probably eventually get back to the NFL one day. He flirted the last couple of off seasons after successful years at Michigan. If he gets wind that this NCAA investigation is not going to go well for him, this is a shot. This is his shot to win a national title at Michigan. And he goes all out, and, maybe one day you get the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary about the last dance with Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum and all those guys come back to make this documentary in 20 years. It's a big, big last dance vibe in Ann Arbor. Over on the other side of that rivalry, Ohio State has a new quarterback. Ryan Day has a Michigan problem. It's been a long time since Ohio State has beat Michigan. Michigan reminds them of that almost every day. And yet they were a missed field goal away from probably winning a national title last year. If they can just find a way to get a few yards closer, we're not talking about a Georgia three-peat. We're not talking about, I don't think we're talking about a TCU national title by any stretch of the imagination. We're talking about Ohio State kicking a game-winning field goal at midnight, all the Cinderella moments, and then going and probably doing pretty close to what Georgia did to TCU. Maybe TCU scores a few more points, but I don't think that TCU's magic had run out at that point. We're talking about an Ohio State national championship. We're talking about Ryan Day as a national champion head coach, most likely, if they just get a few yards closer for their kicker at the end of that Peach Bowl. So for all the talk about Ryan Day, yes, he has a Michigan problem. Yes, I think it's right to question the mental fortitude of his teams in those big games, but they silenced a lot of doubters in that Georgia game. A lot of people that thought they didn't deserve to be in the college football playoff last year, they shut those people up. And Ryan Day, I think, is really tired of hearing the narrative that he doesn't deserve the praise that he's getting. He's really tired of hearing that old phrase, he's born on third base, thinks he hit a triple. He's tired of that. And I think he has something to prove this fall. I think you might see that on the field this fall. The next tier of college football title contenders, you've got teams like LSU. Brian Kelly's second year, he quietly seems a little concerned about the depth of that team, but they're obviously the reigning SEC West champions. They were probably a win upset over Georgia for making things really interesting of including them last year. USC reigning Heisman winner Caleb Williams is back. I mentioned that they upgraded the defense through the transfer portal. It wasn't just Bear Alexander. They had some other good upgrades as well. Can they hold on? Can they be competitive in every single week? I think they're going to have to go undefeated in the Pac-12 to really cement their claim to a college football playoff spot. But can their offense carry them? Can their defense do just enough? Can they force the turnovers like they did last year? And can Lincoln Riley get back to the college football playoff at a second school? Florida State, I think, is loaded. They're my pick to win the ACC this year. We are really high on them as a podcast. If that's an 11-1, if that's a 12-0 Florida State team, they're going to be in the college football playoff and have a lot of experience to make some noise. Their talent might struggle when they run up against Georgia or an Ohio State or a Michigan or an Alabama, but I think they're going to be one of the favorites in the ACC. Clemson is rebuilding a little bit with, a new quarterback situation. Dabo has brought in Garrett Riley as the new offensive coordinator. He realized that the offense was a problem last year, and he did something about it to fix it. Texas, if you look at the odds, is another team in this tier. They are really fighting for, their own last dance narrative in the Big 12. It's been a long time since they've won that conference, and they'd love to go out on a high note. Quinn Ewers really needs to step up. He needs to show that he's the guy that can lead Texas, not just this year, but into the SEC next year. And then the dark horse in the Big Ten, if they can get one or both of those big games, Penn State. I think James Franklin is really, really confident about this year. I think it's the most talented team that he's had in his time in Happy Valley. And quite frankly, I think Penn State has a really good chance to win the Big Ten and surprise a lot of people this year. Drew Allard is a great quarterback. He was the number one rated quarterback last year for a reason. And he played really well when he was asked to last year. Didn't turn the ball over. Was very accurate with the football. You can't understate the just experience that he got last year, even if it wasn't in crucial game situations. Below that, we got some dark horses, and it's a lot of usual suspects. The talented teams that just haven't quite put it together yet, or maybe they're looking to take the next step. Notre Dame, we'll talk about them here in just a second. Sam Hartman, big pickup for them in the transfer portal. We talked a lot about him this offseason, but when he's on and when he's not turning the football over, he's electric, and he can win you games on his own. It's been a long time since Notre Dame's had a quarterback they feel as good as they do about Sam Hartman, and the defense is still going to be really good. Joe Milton's trying to carry the torch at Tennessee and get them over the hump. They're trying to do what they did with Peyton Manning, right? When Peyton Manning came up just short, and then the year after, they win the national title. Tennessee's looking to do that this year. Oregon and Washington in the old Pac-12 North, future Big Ten teams. Don't get me started on that. Bo Nix is looking to go out on a high note, and Michael Penix Jr. might be the best quarterback in college football this year. I think that he could cement his status. He could be right up there in the top 3 of the NFL draft this year with Drake May and Caleb Williams if he can have an encore performance. I think you got to put Texas A&M in the dark horse candidates as well. They are one of the most talented teams in the country. New offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino. But again, that's another team that could run through the SEC West and make it to Atlanta, or they could go 5-7 like they did last year, and they're running Jimbo out of town. Very in between. Oklahoma's looking to bounce back. I think they were just plagued by injuries last year, but Brent Venables certainly has a lot to prove going into the SEC. I mentioned Wisconsin, and I have them in this dark horse tier, not only because their odds are pretty favorable, and there's a clear tier break after Wisconsin, then Utah, who's the last team I'm going to talk about here. But if Wisconsin wins the Big Ten West in the last year of that division, they're in Indianapolis with a chance to knock off one of the big 3, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. And all of a sudden, if they're 11-2 or 12-1 with a regular season Big Ten loss, and they ran the table in the Big Ten West and they upset the Big Ten East champion in the playoff, they're in. I feel pretty comfortable saying that they would get in, maybe as that number 4 seed. So a dark horse candidate if everything can click there. Obviously, very dark horse candidate, but also Utah. And we need to see how Cam Rising's doing. We need to see if he's going to play. They might be down to their 3rd-string quarterback against Florida in week 1. That's going to be a storyline to follow. We'll keep you updated on that. But it could be another situation. Look, they've won a power conference 2 years in a row. At some point, we've got to start giving Utah the respect they deserve. We've got to start giving Kyle Whittingham the respect he deserves as a coach. And we've got to talk about them as a dark horse playoff contender. Garrett's very happy about me saying this, but we got to talk about them in that way, because if they're able to run through a power conference, then they're going to be right there in that conversation come December. All right, one last sip before we wrap this thing up here. And the biggest storyline, if you've been asleep since January, the biggest storyline that we need to talk about to get you ready for this weekend, to get you ready for this season, this is the last season of college football as we know it. And I know that sounds like a very dramatic thing to say. I know that sounds like I'm one of those doom and gloom people that thinks that college football is crumbling at the seams. I'm not one of those people. So let me just say that first off. I don't think any of the 3 of us at this show are one of those people, but just to be clear, this is a last dance situation with the current paradigm of college football that we have. This is the last year of the 14 playoff. We're moving to a 12-team playoff in 2024. This is probably the last year of the Pac-12's existence, which is a crazy sentence to say, but personally, they have no one to blame but themselves for that. The conference has no one to blame but themselves for everyone just rating them and picking them apart for scraps. This is the last year that OU and Texas will compete in the Big 12. They're going to compete. Oklahoma and Texas are going to compete in a conference with Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. Raise your hand if you had that on your bingo card 4 years ago. I did not. I definitely did not. And Oklahoma and Texas, of course, off to the SEC next year. There's been a lot of drama and realignment this summer. There's been a lot of talk about, the demise of college football. The vibes are just really low for a lot of people right now. And listen, I get that. I really do. But this is a sport that's always changed, y'all. This is a sport that every 20 years or so goes through a massive paradigm shift, where whether that's, the service academies no longer being the powers of college football after World War II, whether that's integration, right? When athletes are finally given the chance to compete at these schools that didn't allow them to compete for the longest time. Scholarship limits, original TV deals with ESPN and other cable companies, right? We were once, less than 50 years ago, we were in a situation where only the 3 top programs in the whole country got on TV every week. And obviously that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy of who stays relevant and who stays, in front of everybody's minds. We are in a much better place in college football than I think people want to realize. And I know that it's scary. I know that change is really, really difficult to figure out and really difficult to navigate. But and I know it's stupid that Washington is about to fly to Rutgers for a conference game. I know that that's dumb. And I know that when we see that it's obviously for the almighty TV dollar, we just look at that and we kind of pucker a little bit. We don't like that. But this Saturday, we'll have games back. And next year, we're going to have games to watch. And the year after that, we're going to have games to watch. And the year after that, we're going to have games to watch. This is a sport that has always been about change. It has always changed. The only constant in college football has been change for its entirety of existence. And so we can either be scared of that, and I totally get that mindset, or we can embrace it. We can give it a chance, and we can show up on Saturdays and, be as passionate as we ever have. Because guess what? Without us, without fans, without people that, really care about this sport deeply, those TV people don't have any money, right? We ultimately hold the power. I know it feels powerless. I know that all these decisions have been made without the fan in mind, without the student athlete in mind, but the fans still ultimately have the power, y'all. We ultimately still have the power. We are the ones that can vote with our wallets and, make this what we want it to be. And we can have our voices heard still. So I'm optimistic about the future. I think especially these next 2 years with a 12-team college football playoff and ultimately probably 2 G5 invites to that 12-team college football playoff with the Pac-12 just fading into oblivion. I'm excited about that. I know not everybody's excited about playoff expansion. We think it's watering down. I think that's going to give us more fun regular season games, more meaningful regular season games. More teams are going to have something to play for other than just a trip to Florida at the end of the year. There's something really, really to be excited about the future of college football. Call me an optimist. Call me someone that has their head in the sand. Call me whatever you want. I personally am really excited, and it all starts with us getting games back this Saturday. So with that, I'm going to leave you. I'm going to rest my voice up for this next final episode before the season starts. Again, we're hitting it hard on Thursday. Garrett and Mitch will be back. We're doing our darlings. We're doing our playoff predictions, and we're previewing week 0 football games. We're talking about actual football on the field, and it's going to be glorious. So until then, make sure you're following us on social media at 3TechPod, Twitter, X, Instagram, YouTube. Like and subscribe, and make sure that you're telling friends to get ready for this college football season. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.
Gracious him. How about